2022, there will be an election for chairperson for this committee according to Standing Rule 82.1. I will now take nominations. Did everybody, Ms. Bartman?
Thank you so much, Ms. Karmish Ahmed. I would like to nominate Mr. Christopher Fry for chairperson.
Right. Is there any further nominations?
Seconded.
Seconded. No further nominations. Mr. Fry, are you here?
Yes, I am here, ma'am.
Congratulations, you've been duly elected as the chairperson. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much to the committee members for electing me and putting your faith in me in this role. And I hope to repay your faith with a fair and thorough leading of this committee. I'd like to welcome all the committee members in attendance and the members of the public, if any. I'd ask the members if they would just introduce themselves to the meeting, please, starting with Member Bartman.
Thank you so much. And firstly, I just would like to also welcome you as chairperson and congratulate you on your election today. My name is Deirdre Bartman. I'm a member of the committee.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, newly elected chairperson. Congratulations and welcome, Wendy Kaiser-Philander.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Congratulations, Member Branke is here.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair. My name is Rachel van Voorge.
Thank you so much. Member Plato, could you unmute yourself, please, and introduce yourself to the meeting?
Yeah, Chair, thank you. Congratulations. I'm not a permanent member of this committee, alternate member, but I'm in. Congratulations. Thank you, Dan Plato.
Thank you so much. Any other members? In that case, we will move along. I'd like to indicate the rules of engagement. All members are to be muted at the beginning of the meeting and to avoid any background noises. The members are to flag points of order in the chat function of Teams. All video and audio must be switched off to improve the quality of the connection. If an official is speaking, they may put on their mic and video though. And then participants must please switch off their mics once they have finished speaking. We come to the next item on the agenda, which is the briefing by the Public Service Commission on the investigative reports submitted to the Western Cape Provincial Parliament. I'll now allow the Commissioner to brief the committee. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairperson and members. I just want to also mention that I have members of my team here, who is Mr. Paul Rockman, Ms. Brian, the Provincial Director, Ms. Bryony Joynut-Khanif, who is the Deputy Director, and also Ms. Marlene Slees, one of our Assistant Directors. Thank you once again for the opportunity to brief this committee. I think this committee is it's quite different from the last committee that I briefed. And the last time I briefed this committee was in 2020. So it's 2 years ago. I'm not going to go through the full presentation. I'll be touching on various aspects thereof. So a lot of it is given just as information so that members can read through it. So just because many of the committee members are new, I'm going to touch on the introduction briefly and just summarize the mandate of the Public Service Commission. Our mandate covers the administration of the public service. So that's all the procedures and policy frameworks and accountability mechanisms, personnel procedures and practices. And under this also resides grievances. So we deal with grievances that's not resolved by departments. Public administration practice, so all the functions and activities executed by the public service to provide a service to the public, adherence to applicable procedures in the public service, and then compliance with constitutional values and principles in Section 195 of the Constitution. So we deal with grievances, as I mentioned before, and we also deal with complaints relating to public administration and by virtue of a cabinet minute of a few years ago, we also administer the National Anti-Corruption Hotline, and so we deal with those complaints. So there have been a number of investigations, so we're only going to touch on some of the investigations that we've dealt with, some significant investigations. All of these investigative reports would have been made available to the Provincial Parliament and hopefully to this committee as well. So I will touch on some aspects of each of these investigations. The first ones that I need to touch on is the 3 hospitals where there were investigations conducted. So the East River Hospital, there was an allegation of an assault of a patient by nursing staff. And that was an own accord investigation. So we saw things in the media and we investigated. Similarly, Stellenbosch Hospital, there was an allegation of the rape of a minor in a ward. And once again, of my own initiative, we initiated an investigation. And then finally, by the investigation by Red Cross Hospital, which deals with acts which related to maintenance, as well as allegations of nepotism. And that was an anonymous complaint that was received by the Commission. So in relation to the East River Hospital incident, as I mentioned before, there was allegations in the media that a lady of 52-year-old was quite ill, had been assaulted, and furthermore that the members of the family were obstructed from visiting her. And so we wanted to establish whether in fact an assault took place and whether the staff were preventing the family from visiting and so on. So in many of our investigations, the allegations are found not to be substantiated, but there are lessons that we draw from some of these. And similarly, in this matter of the East River Hospital. In this case, there was no evidence found that, in fact, the patient had been assaulted by staff. It turned out that she had fallen off the bed and so on. But there were very important lessons that could be drawn from that. So some of the lessons which the hospital had implemented already by the time of investigation was more frequent patient checks, regularly checking the patient's vitals, and establishing an action plan accordingly. We must say the hospital investigative management cooperated quite fully with the investigation that we conducted. So the Public Service Commission looked at the reports of the investigation conducted by the hospital, and we then did our own further investigation. And our findings are then presented there as well. We found that that in essence there was a need to take appropriate action when vitals were checked, for example. So for example, the nursing staff here checked the blood pressure of Ms. Rafu, and she was in a high risk category, but they didn't take appropriate action in terms of making sure that she was more regularly checked. We did find that from the research that the ratio of patients to staff was quite high. And so that did impact on the capacity of the nurses to provide proper nursing care. So we agreed with the recommendations made by the Department of Health in this matter, and we made further recommendations. And so we said that more frequent checks needed to take place, especially with regard to patients who are at high risk. Because of the configuration of the wards, we also felt that where the nursing station is not visible from all patients' beds, we felt that it was necessary to institute a walkabout in order to make sure that patients can be seen, especially since this incident happened at night when most of the patients were asleep. And we also felt that there needed to be disciplinary consequences for staff who were negligent in preventing harm to patients while the patients are in the care of the hospital. So again, the allegations in the media was not substantiated. However, there were very important lessons which needed to be, which we felt needed to be taken on board by the department and by the hospital. The second hospital investigation related to the Stellenbosch Hospital. And here was an allegation in the media that a female patient, while in hospital, had been raped. Due to the nature of these allegations and being very serious, I then initiated an own initiative investigation. And we made a number of findings. So it is clear that the patient, in fact, was admitted to the hospital as an involuntary patient under the Mental Health Care Act. It is also clear that the incident that took place did not amount to rape as legally defined. However, there was a contravention of the law. In other words, there was a coercive intercourse in terms of the Criminal Law, Sexual Offences and Related Matters Act. And so there was a criminal act which had taken place. So we concluded that that's one of the conclusions. So there were challenges in relation to the question of reporting, that the incident was not immediately reported to the South African Police Service as was necessary in terms of the legislation. It was also alarming that one of the sisters, one of the medical sisters that were in the hospital at the time, was left alone with mental health patients. So there was allegations, and we found this to be correct, that a rape kit had not been administered, so the protocols there was not implemented. And furthermore, and this is more important because it leads to systemic issues, is the question that the hospital is not designed to effectively allow for full and constant observation of patients from the vantage point of the nurse station. So when we did the investigation, we discovered that the hospital was clearly not set up as a psychiatric hospital, but we were also told that due to the high incidence of an increasing incidence of mental health in the communities, mainly attributable, not mainly, but somewhat attributable to drug use, ordinary hospitals now had to set aside wards to deal with psychiatric patients. And this led to challenges and led to hospitals, and in this instance hospitals, not complying with the department's own policy guidelines in respect of involuntary admissions and mental health patients. And so that is quite a concern. And the hospital itself not being equipped to deal with psychiatric patients, but being compelled to do so due to there not being spaces available at hospitals which are equipped to deal with these kinds of patients. So we recommended a number of things. Firstly, we recommended corrective action in respect of some of the medical staff and the hospital manager. We also recommended issues relating to the design of the hospital and relating to the question of bathrooms, male and female, because there was only one bathroom at the time. And we recommended that the department, in a sense, look at best practice, because there are best practices which are employed by other hospitals in a similar position who are not equipped to deal with psychiatric patients, but who've had to adapt. So the Stellenbosch Hospital learns from other hospitals, such as Victoria Hospital. And then that the hospital and the department strictly complies with the policy guideline on 72-hour assessment of involuntary mental health care users. The next few pages is just a bit of an excursion into the law, because I think it's important that members know that obviously there was no rape committed. However, there was a criminal act committed in that there was an act of consensual sexual penetration with a child. So she was not able to give permission given her age, and so there was a criminal act which had taken place. And this is quite important because it speaks to many issues, and we've already engaged with Department of Health, Social Services and Education, because it's questions as to how departments coordinate these issues where it cuts across provinces. When we're dealing with the issue of reporting of of rape or reporting of incidents of consensual intercourse with a child, one of the questions we raised was what happens at a healthcare facility where a child presents who is pregnant? Does this get reported as it's required in terms of the law? What is and one of the responses received was that that in fact doesn't necessarily get reported, but also the fact that when Department of Health visits schools, principals would report that there's no pregnant learners, yet the medical staff are fully aware that there are learners in that school who report regularly because they are pregnant and they're receiving medical care. And so the question of how one liaises and also how the provincial departments liaise with the national departments like police, like the Director of Public Prosecutions. So this is an issue which we've raised with departments and we're raising on an ongoing basis in order to establish good practice and best practice. The third investigation relating to a hospital related to Red Cross, and in essence, this is related to staff complaints relating to nepotism in appointments, also relating to the condition of the staff residents and the question of the tools of trade or the wearing of the same uniforms. The following findings were made. We found that in fact it was substantiated that uniforms had not been changed for the last 5 years. As relating the question of nepotism, while most of these allegations were found not to be substantiated, it was very concerning that it related in the main to a lady who was the labor relations officer. And so we found it not substantiated based on the evidence that we could find. And there was another allegation relating to a gentleman who was relating to the appointment of two of his sons as porters. And these two were found unsubstantiated. But what was a concern to the PSC was the fact that you seem to have a hospital with relatively junior level staff. And so we know with junior level staff, there's lots of applications that come in, where there seems to be quite a bit of people who are blood relatives working in this institution. So just the fact that we were unable to establish that these allegations were substantiated, of course, doesn't mean that nothing untoward was taking place. You note from the presentation that, for example, one of the instances of the appointments related to a matter where somebody was appointed, I think, as a porter, where the Z83, the application form that everybody needs to, all applicants need to complete, it was only signed. So there's no other information that was provided. So the application of Mr. A. Peterson was only signed and dated. And we could also not find the approval of the selection panel in this instance. So there seem to be challenges in relation to the whole HR function at the hospital. There were allegations about the staff residence that it was in a poor condition, and we found this allegation to be substantiated. Red Cross is under new management, and I know some of these issues are being attended to. The same in relation to the staff uniform. There seems to have been challenges in procurement of uniform. The management was unable to explain as to in clear terms as to why there was no procurement of uniform. And so this too was found to be substantiated. We recommended that it was undesirable for the lady in HR to remain stationed at the hospital, given that her family members were employed there and that there were allegations surrounding their appointment, even though we could not substantiate these allegations. And we also recommended the temporary lifting of recruitment and selection delegations to the Human Resources Unit, and that this unit be appropriately capacitated with HR training for a period of time. There were issues relating to documentation because the documents, the personnel files were not helpful. It was in complete disarray. And we recommended that strong action be taken against officials who are neglectful in respect of state record keeping and of control. I must just say that the recommendation in respect of the HR official was that she not be involved in HR or even at the hospital, but she has since retired. We've been advised by the department that she has since retired. So those are the hospitals. Then there are a number of noteworthy investigations in relation to the Department of Education. Honourable members will know obviously that these are the two bigger departments within the Western Cape government, and so necessarily, given the sheer volume, we generally get more complaints and even grievances from these departments. So there was allegations in relation to both of the school matters, Tafelsig Primary and Womber Secondary. Main allegations relates to appointment irregularity, which pertains to the secretarial post. The advert wasn't placed in the media. There was mismanagement of funds, and that the school had withheld tax payments to the South African Revenue Service, which it deducted from staff salaries. There was irregular expenditure, and that the procurement policy in respect to the school was violated, and that there was no proper governance of school funds, that the SGP approval was not sought in relation to matters where it was necessary, and that decisions were not recorded. Then there's a range of findings which we made, and in relation to the schools, I must say, and I generally, when we meet with this committee, every time we do meet with the committee, we generally have one or two schools, and this relates to the question of governance. Governance, yes, which resides with the governing body, but which also relates to the role of the principal as manager of the school, but also relates to the district and the department in its oversight role. Because very often you have governing bodies who are not capacitated to deal with complex financial issues, procurement issues, and in that manner, the principal needs to be above reproach and have a relevant oversight, but also that school needs to be, there needs to be oversight from the level of the district manager. And very often there are reports which are made which are not followed up. And so some of the findings here is that there was non-compliance with the school finance policy. There was lack of controls and oversight on the part of the SGB, the governing body. There was lack of supervision over funds by the principal. There was poor administration detection, poor maladministration systems, detection systems in place. And there was failure on the part of the SGB and the department to properly investigate allegations in the first instance. Again, this very often one finds when we get complaints that the complainant says, I reported to the circuit manager, I reported to the department, and follow-ups are not made once again here. And we found that, in fact, in this case, there was a failure on the part of both the SGB and the department to properly investigate the allegation in the first instance. And then, of course, we made findings relating that the guidelines on advertisements for contract posts, that these are not clear. So we made certain recommendations that regular audits be undertaken in respect of these schools by the district staff, capacity building for the principal, the bursar, and the SGB, proper and effective response to allegations of irregular expenditure at school level. So yes, well, that's the issue of reporting, and that the department and district be responsive, and that the nature of advertisement of contract posts is problematic. There must be a set standard that fulfills the requirements of transparency and openness when posts are advertised internally. So in this instance, for example, the principal would advise certain people or other schools of a post that's vacant, whereas there are people eligible who are on contract in his own school who could apply for the post, who was unaware of it because of the manner in which the post was advertised in inverted commas. Then also in the education domain, there was also an anonymous complaint relating to what was alleged to be an irregular appointment. The former head of Department of Education was appointed to a position of governance and exam specialist advisor on a one-year contract. That the process was fast-tracked, and submission was signed off on the day, and the submission was signed off on the day of assumption of duty of the new HOD. That was in fact the case, that the submission for this post was signed off by the new HOD on the first day that he assumed office, although he had been shadowing the former HOD for a few months before. And there's been SACE requirements had been relaxed for the appointment to office-based educator posts. So as the Public Service Commission, we found the motivation for the creation of the contract post to be plausible. There were very peculiar circumstances, and there was a need for somebody with expertise. And so we found this was quite plausible why there was the need for the contract post. And we got that. We interviewed a range of senior officials, including the HOD, Mr. Walters. We, however, found the process followed by the current HOD, the new HOD, to be lacking proper consultation, despite the need for the post. There was a need for the post, but the manner in which the post was created and motivated for didn't provide much room for consultation. In fact, the branch where this contract appointee was to take up the post, that branch head was not even consulted. There was a relaxation of South African Council of Educator requirements because this was an educator post, although office-based. And so we're saying this didn't benefit from an appropriate analysis that would justify the decision. In other words, there wasn't a question as to why are we needing to relax the requirements of the African Council of Educators, especially since there would have been a very small pool of candidates. And it would appear, however, and our conclusion was that the appointment was not illegal. Although the department claimed that it had through senior officials, it had no idea who would be applying for the posts. Given the serious need identified by the HOD, the weight of the risk that would attract if we didn't have somebody in that post, one would assume that the department would have at least your normal period of recruitment. The advertisement runs for a normal period of time. Here, we had a small window period, 5 calendar days, to fill this very, very specialized post, which the department could not do without. So that is a challenge for us. We've found as well, because the reason why this post was necessary, according to the departmental officials, and we accept that, is that there was a need for somebody, particularly in the exam section, to be hands-on and immediately available to work. So we found the department derelict in its duty to ensure that there was proper human resource planning and leadership succession planning. There was a stopgap situation arose where a former HOD was employed on a year contract after reaching retirement age. He was well over 65 years old. In fact, he was 69 years old at the time. And also, we found that the creation of posts must benefit from a proper analysis of the needs and the competences required, as well as a competent assessment of the likely pool of candidates which should be available. And again, 5 days available for such a critical post, where there's probably, Then line managers must always be involved. As I said before, the line manager here was not involved in the creation of this post. And then all administrative decisions must be checked for legality, and administrators should be careful not to assume powers that are not theirs to make. Yes, that related to the deviation of the requirement for South African Council of Educators, where we were struggling to find the authority for the HOD to deviate from that requirement. So we said that WCD should undertake a proper analysis of its critical staffing requirements so as to ensure proper succession planning. And we said, of course, this was a challenge which arose within the administrative industry at level of official. I must emphasize, it occurred at the level of officials, of the public servants. And so we said it needs to be made available to the administrative leadership of the department and the political leadership as well. Chairperson, that concludes the report in relation to our investigations, and that was what we were called to brief the department, the legislature on. However, we have included, and I would need guidance from the chair, just some of the other issues we are busy with. So grievance management is included there, and just some of the statistical information and some of the research that we are currently doing in respect of the province. It's not much, but it's there for the perusal of the committee. That's the one aspect, Chair, that I would need clarity with the committee, whether the chairperson wants me to take the committee through that. And then one important matter which I've also included, but which I will not necessarily take the committee through, and the chairperson can guide me on this, is that the term of office of the current commissioner comes to an end next year in September. And we have, over the years, we have discovered, and nationally we've seen huge gaps when processes are not initiated at the level of the legislature timeously. So I have included in the pack, but I have not gone through. I can, if the chairperson would like me to, the process, the legislative process, because the last filling of the post in the Western Cape, it was 9 months before the appointment of the current serving commissioner. In Mpumalanga, we're sitting with a vacancy for 3 years. And so it's important that the legislature initiates a process for either renewal, if so disposed, alternatively for advertisement, if so disposed, for a successor to the current commissioner. Chair, that is my presentation. I will be led by the chairperson of the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Goosen, for that presentation. We appreciate it. I believe in the matters that you asked me for guidance, the statistics, as well as the terms of office for the commissioners. I think it would be beneficial for the committee if you would shed some light on both those aspects, please. Does anybody have any other things to say before I hand over back to Mr. Goosen? No, thank you. So would you please, Honourable Dugmore, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. Thank you also to the Commissioner for the presentation. Just in regard to all those other matters which have been resolved or closed, as the presentation says, are we able to actually get sort of just like a summary report as to the nature of the grievance and how it was settled, etc., like the detail of that? Thanks.
Thank you, Honourable Dugmore. I think we can handle that in the questions that will arise after the rest of the presentation is done. So thank you so much for that. Mr. Goosen, please continue.
Sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. So in respect then of the other matters that we deal with, certainly in the province, so in respect of grievance management, we're talking about the financial year 2021 to 22. We received 60 grievances. And remember, these are grievances which were not resolved at the level of the department, so they come to the commission. And we finalized 49 and carried over into this current financial year. There are 11 from the previous year. So all of the grievances, except for one, was resolved within the 30-day mandatory period. So in terms of applicable prescripts, the grievance must be resolved within 30 days. So the average time taken to finalize a grievance after receiving the last information, because we often need to get information from departments, is 16 working days. So it's 16 working days that requires the PSC to resolve a grievance generally. So it means that 48 out of 49 finalized grievances were within the 30-day period. And this represents performance of 97.9% in respect of resolving grievances within 30 days. In respect of complaints, for this period, 22 cases were received and 17 were closed. Then I did allude earlier on to the National Anti-Corruption Hotline. This is that we also responsible for. 23 cases were received and 14 were closed during this period, 21-22. We also deal with financial disclosures of senior managers in all departments in the Western Cape. So 100% of senior managers disclosed and they all disclosed. In other words, all senior managers at all departments disclosed. All of them were received and scrutinized, and of course, relevant communication sent to the relevant MECs and action taken where appropriate. We did during 21-22 inspections of the Western Cape Social Development local offices. This was finalized and the report was produced. We also conducted inspections in some offices of the Department of Home Affairs, and a report was produced here as well. In terms of the future, 2020 current financial year, we are planning at the national level, so inspections at Department of Justice Magistrates Courts in the Western Cape only. So this is specifically in the Western Cape. And then we will be doing an assessment of the Department of Social Development foster care management system. That's currently ongoing projects. Then, in respect of the terms of office of the Public Service Commission, so the Public Service Commission, of course, I've already alluded to the various powers that the Public Service Commission has, and there's a summary of the powers, of the various aspects of our mandate contained there. So it's Public Service Commission Act, Constitution, Public Service Act, and the PFMA. Our composition is 14 commissioners, 9 at the province and 5 at the National Assembly, together with a chairperson and deputy chair. Bears mention that we do not have a chair at the moment. We have an acting chair who has been designated as deputy chair. So currently we do not have a chairperson designated by the president. So the Public Service Commission is accountable to the National Assembly and, of course, at the provincial level to the provincial legislature or the provincial parliament. That's just a very unflattering picture of some of us all of us commissioners. And then, yeah, so we've identified at the PSC, because remember we are a national body. So I've been appointed by the president for Western Cape Province, but we comprise one body, and so I'll be dealing with some national matters as well. So our experience is that there's been a gap of several months and sometimes a year between appointments of commissioners. Vacancies take a very long time to fill. I've given the figures there. The last time the Public Service Commissioner, when I was appointed, was 2018. The previous commissioner's term ended, I think, in December 2017. So there was a period of 9 months. Mpumalanga Commissioner post has been vacant for 3 years. And of course, there's advantages to continuity, because one builds relations with the executive, with the senior management, and so on in the province. So in order to ensure that there's continuity, whether with the same commissioner or a new commissioner, one needs to start the process very early, probably at least 9 months, and I'd suggest even longer, before the expiry of the term. Current commissioner's term of office ends on 30th of September 2023. And of course, between that, we've got the December-January period, and we know what happens during that period in terms of matters of this nature. So the Constitution speaks to the appointment of 2 sets of commissioners. One is at the national level in Section 1968A, which is recommended by the National Assembly. More importantly, for our purposes, Section 1968B says a commissioner nominated by the Premier must be recommended by a committee of the provincial legislature. So that's the role of this provincial parliament. And then it speaks a bit to the eligibility of a commissioner in Section 196 of the Constitution. Then, and forgive me because it's in various places, in the Constitution, it's in the Public Service Commission Act as well, so one needs to navigate the various pieces of legislation. In Section 412, where the president is required to appoint a commissioner nominated by the Premier, the president addresses a letter to the Premier. That is for the appointment of a commissioner. So that occurred in 2017-18 when I was appointed, because they're required to appoint. I'm coming back to the next slide in terms of the administrative process. But the renewability of the appointment of a commissioner is dealt with differently. So although the legislation says a commissioner can be appointed for 5 years at a time and a maximum of 2 terms, there wasn't any guidance on this. And so there was an amendment to the Public Service Commission Act in 2019, which added subsection 5 of, let's see the section. Subsection 5 was then added to to Section 4. So subsection 5 says that before the expiry of the term of a commissioner, the president may renew for one additional term. In the case of the National Assembly, there's a procedure. In the case of a commissioner who was nominated by the Premier of a province on the recommendation of the provincial legislature concerned. So there's the appointment provisions and there's the renewal provisions. So the president may renew within 90 days of the expiry of the term on the recommendation of the legislature. So subsection 6 says subsection 4 does not apply to the renewal of the term. So if the legislature or the relevant committee decides we're going to renew the contract of a provincial commissioner or national commissioner, then there is no advertisement required. In other words, the relevant committee doesn't have to go through the process of advertising a vacancy and selecting, if so resolved. If the committee resolves that we want to appoint somebody rather than renew, then that process follows. So there's two possibilities which is open to the legislature. One, the legislature decides to renew, and that recommendation goes to the president. Two, the legislature or the committee decides that it's not going to renew, we're going to appoint afresh, in which there's an advertisement that goes, and they usually appoint an ad hoc committee who then sits through shortlist interviews and ultimately makes a recommendation. So that is just a reminder to the legislature, that the renewal reminder, it's flashing, something needs to happen. So my suggestion is that the provincial parliament initiates the process as soon as possible. We've got it preferably by 30th November, but I would say that's at the absolute latest. And then I've already clarified the pathway to appointment. There's two possibilities: renewal of term, so one assess however the committee deems appropriate, the incumbent, and secondly, the possibility advertising the position where there's a pool of candidates who then applies for that. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mr. Horsen, for that very comprehensive and deeglike presentation. Sorry, I don't know what the English word for deeglik is. I will now take questions. Honourable Dugmore, are you going to add to your question about the summary of the cases?
Yes, Chairperson, thank you.
You back on, sir?
May I continue, Chair?
Yes, you may.
Okay, thank you once again, and also to the Commissioner. What I would like to ask, I think I previously asked a question, around getting a full report about the nature of the grievances, what was closed, why, just an explanation in writing about that. And then secondly, just on this issue of renewal or advertising, can I just ask if the committee, and I presume it would be our committee, discusses this matter, and obviously the options have been explained, but if, for instance, the committee took a decision or takes a decision to re-advertise, does that imply that the current incumbent is not allowed to apply or not? So in other words, obviously we have an option to say, if we discuss, okay, we'd like to renew, or if we decide that we want to advertise. My question is the current commissioner then allowed to also apply?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Horsen, would you take other questions before you answer that? Honourable Dugmore?
Sorry, I'm not. Okay, I can take other questions.
Okay.
Yes.
Honourable Dugmore, is that hand still up?
No, sorry, I'll take it down now. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, Honourable Marais?
Thank you. I've joined late, so forgive me if what I'm going to ask has already been answered. I apologize for being late. I had other appointments. Tell me, how does the labor equity laws affect persons that would be appointed, does the Labour Equity Act apply, or can this person always be of one culture or one language group? Or does it also bring equity into the picture?
Thank you very much. Members, are there any other questions? I assume not. Mr. Goosen, would you like to answer them?
Yes, Chair, thank you very much. First, Honourable Dugmore's questions, the question of the full reports, the nature and so on of the grievances and complaints, we can make that available, and we will. I've just asked my provincial director to make a note, so we will make that available through the committee secretary. Then, in relation to the decision, if the committee takes the decision not to renew but to appoint, in other words, to go through the advertising process, there is nothing precluding the current serving commissioner from applying. In fact, it has happened in other provinces and nationally, and that was the position prior to the amendment in 2019 that existing commissioners would then apply. So there's nothing precluding existing commissioners to apply and compete with other candidates. In relation to Honourable Maray's question, how does the labour equity laws impact? Chairperson, one needs to bear in mind that the public service commissioners are not regarded as employees, and so it's a presidential appointment in essence on recommendation, and so the equity issues do not apply. However, we have certainly at the national advised the speaker at that level of what the current equity issues are in relation to the makeup of the commission. However, of course, committees need not may accept that advice or may accept that information and then act according to how it deems fit. So there is no provision for that. I do know at the national level, for example, there was a question at one stage, in terms of one outstanding vacancy where they said, look, we now need to get somebody who is disabled. And unbeknown to the national parliament, they had just appointed somebody who in fact fell into that category. So it's quite clear they don't necessarily, it's not necessarily need to be taken into account. However, of course, it's up to the committee to decide its own further requirements. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. And I think that we need, I think the members would agree that we would need to jump on this as soon as the report season is done at the end of October. So that's something to put on the agenda for the medium term to the procedural officer. Thank you very much, Mr. Goosen and your team for joining us today and for...
I have a follow-up question.
Oh, sorry. Yes, Honourable Marais.
Right. So these commissioners are not considered employees. They are appointed by the president. But there is a built-in a clause that says on a recommendation of the Premier. So what if the Premier and the President cannot agree on an appointment? Is there a solution to that problem? Or can the President just forcefully appoint somebody, even if the legislation in the Western Cape didn't consider that person suitable for our needs? Can the President overrule that decision of the legislation as has been sent to the Premier, who then speak to the President?
Thank you. I'm not sure. I need to be guided here by Mr. Goosen. Do you have an answer for that, sir?
Chairperson, I think that's a legal question. I'm a lawyer, but I don't think I can answer that question. But just
I only ask difficult questions.
Just to say, Chair, that in the instance of renewal, this is a strange anomaly that has crept into the legislation. In the case of appointment, the Premier recommends. In the case of renewal in the province, the legislature recommends directly. So it cuts out the Premier, it seems. So I don't know if that's an anomaly or just fell off somewhere, but that seems to be a difference there.
Thank you so much. Honorable Dagmo, you got a follow-up?
Chair, just a very, very quick point arising from Honorable Marais' question and the response.
Oh, we've lost him. Oh, wait, here is he. We've lost Honorable Dagmo. Let's give him a couple of seconds to see if he comes back.
Sir, while you're waiting on Honorable Dagmo, I would also like to hear his follow-up.
Okay.
Will this then constitute an outstanding matter which we expect the Commission to come back to us on?
Sorry, am I back, Chairperson? Am I back?
Honorable Dagmo. We'll deal with your question now, Honorable Marais. Honorable Dagmo, continue.
Okay, sorry about that, Chair and Member Marais. I just want to get clarity on this. So if the committee, and I'm sure the Chair will arrange for us to meet and discuss this matter, if we decide to renew, essentially this recommendation from our committee would probably go to the legislature. And if the legislature agrees to that, there's then no need to ask the Premier. So it will actually be a full decision of the entire legislature that will then be communicated. So in fact, the Speaker would then have to write to the President. In the other version of what's available to us, if we decide to advertise, etc., then committee or ad hoc committee proposes to the legislature proposes to Premier writes to President, and President appoints. Because my understanding from that, and I think Mr. Marais has raised a good question, I think it would almost be unprecedented if you had a decision of the legislature. Well, firstly, it would be unprecedented, I think, if the Premier did not accept the recommendation of the legislature, but I presume the Premier would have that right. And I think it would also be fairly unprecedented, although probably not unlawful, if the President then did not. But it seems to me there are some safeguards in this process, and the view of the legislature, given that these are Chapter 9 institutions, essentially the voice of the legislature, I think, is a very important one on these matters. But Chair, I also just wanted to express my appreciation for the thoroughness of the report that we've received and the commitment to providing us with the full report as requested. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Dagmo. I think, Honorable Marais, we will take your questions on the review, on the legality of what you were asking, Mr. Khosa, because he's already indicated that he cannot answer that, and you will answer on the legal point. Is there anything more, Honorable Marais? Because I see your hand still up. No, you've gone quiet. Okay. If there are no further questions or comments, thank you very much, Mr. Khosa. We really appreciate your thoroughness of your report, and if there are any other questions before your term ends, we will be glad to have you back at our standing committee. Thank you very much. You and your team are excused from the meeting now. I'd like to extend a welcome to the Director General of the Department of the Premier, Mr. Harry Malila. Thank you very much, sir. Sorry, yes, thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. I was just switching on my camera. Thanks for the acknowledgement, and good afternoon to all the members and also to the Commissioner.
Thank you, sir. All right, our next item on our agenda is the consideration and adoption of the draft committee meeting minutes of 27 July 2022. I hereby table the draft minutes. Are there any comments? Are there any omissions or additions to be made? Thank you for putting it on the screen, ma'am. As we go through the minutes. I see the meeting was adjourned at 11:50. Thank you, Ms. Thank you, sir. Thank you, ma'am. Are there any further comments to be made on the minute? If not, can I have a proposer to accept the minutes, please?
Yeah, I would propose if I could, but I wasn't at that particular meeting. I submitted an apology.
Thank you, Honorable Bartman. I would also to accept, but I wasn't a member, so I cannot do so.
Chairperson, if I look correctly, I was also not present at that meeting.
Okay, so we need either is Honorable Honorable Brinkhuis and Honorable Dagmar wasn't there, so yes.
Greetings, sir.
Yes, Honorable Brinkhuis. Welcome to the meeting.
I so move.
There is a mover. Thank you so much. I don't know if we have someone in the house or in the meeting that was at the meeting who can second the minute. Honorable Brinkhuis.
Chair, I'm not sure if you see my hand.
Sorry, Wasima. Yes, sorry, ma'am.
Chair, members, Keko has moved. The minutes may be adopted. There's no need. There's nothing in the rules that asks for a seconder. So it may, if he is in agreement with the minutes, it may be adopted. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Are we in agreement with that ruling?
Viva EFF, viva. Viva EFF, viva.
Thank you, sir, for that. Although that's, yeah, I will not work with it. Right. The next item on our agenda is the consideration and drafting of the draft committee program. That was circulated to all. Are there any additions or are there any comments to be made on the draft committee program?
Okay. Because there was a new, there was a handover of chairpersons. We did not, I did not circulate the revised draft program that I only discussed with you yesterday. So yes. Yeah, I think that we can, the members may add or delete any matters that they want to discuss or add any matters that they want to discuss, but I can flight the program that we have, that we discussed yesterday.
Yes, you can. In the meantime, Honorable Dagmar. I see your hand.
Chair, thank you. Yes. Well, Chair, we obviously haven't had the benefit of seeing, what was proposed, but at the same time, I think it is true to say that this committee has been very inactive, has got a huge backlog to catch up, particularly on the legislative matters which are central to the work of this committee. The ongoing delays around the environmental commissioner issue, the proposed amendment that has come from the executive to make the appointment of the commissioner optional. For instance, we've had the public hearings. There was talk about having a few more, but I'm not sure if that issue is on the program that the committee coordinator has spoken about, but clearly that is an absolutely critical issue for this committee to deal with. So, that would be my one proposal. But what I would what I would prefer is if that draft that the chair and the committee coordinator developed, if that could actually be circulated, and if we were able then to respond to an email. I've already made one particular proposal, if it's not on that draft, and then possibly we can just do a round robin on emails around proposals that other members may have for critical issues that we need to deal with. So that would be, I would be a little bit uncomfortable about having a full discussion now.
Thank you so much, Honorable Dagmar. I take your comment. I want to say that I have been briefed on the outstanding legislative issues, this legislative points that this committee needs to take under review. Let me just take this point to outline what I believe our vision should be. I think that we have to be true to our name, Standing Committee on the Premier and Constitutional Matters, and the outstanding constitutional matters need to be addressed. We have addressed them in the draft program. What I will do is I'll sit with the procedural officer one more time during the next week, possibly as early as Monday. I will arrange that with the procedural officer, and then I will commit to opening that report by the end of next week. So far, we have a meeting scheduled for the 26th of August. So that'll give everybody enough time by the middle of next week. Sorry, I will try and get that draft program up by the middle of next week, so we know exactly what we're going to be talking, what we're going to be discussing on the meeting of the 26th. And Honourable Dagmo, I want to assure you again that the outstanding matters will receive attention, because I think that's what we need to do as a committee. So what I will say is that I will confirm the draft business plan early next week. I will circulate it. I will ask the procedural officers to circulate it to the members, and then we can move forward with our business. Thank you very much, Mr. Honourable Marais.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I want to support Honourable Dagmo. This has been a committee that has not been functioning as I would have liked it to, by regularity of meeting. Remember the whole issue about enlarging the legislature. This is a vital issue also, and we must keep in mind this might also come to this committee because it requires a constitutional amendment. And I would just like that more attention should be given to the regularity of this committee meeting to discuss such important matters. That's all I want to say.
Thank you, Honourable Dagmo.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, can I just check something with you? Have the public service commissioners left the meeting now? Because there's just one issue I want to raise on that matter. Are they still in the meeting, or did they leave?
I don't see them on procedural officer, Ms. Kamish Ahmad. I don't see members. It's just members, yeah. Thank you.
But Chair, just to let you know that the meeting is an open meeting, so it is being flighted on live stream on YouTube.
Thank you.
Okay. No, well, thank you very much for that, Chair. No, I would just then, instead of saying what I wanted to say, I would just then, obviously, I think from the meeting we've just had and the briefing, that there is an urgent need for us to also decide on the two options that were outlined to us in regard to the Public Service Commissioner and the processes. So if we could also just add that to the program, and then maybe when we have that discussion, I think it's probably, I'm not saying we should go into committee, but I think we must ask through you, Chair, the procedural officer, just to get advice when we discuss that matter of our choice, because it does now involve individuals. Whether that section of the meeting, our next meeting, whenever we schedule that for, should be in committee or not. But I think we must put that on our program of action, the urgent resolution on our approach to the two options that were presented to us. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Honourable Dagmo. That is noted, and yes, that will receive attention. There's a couple of other issues. There's a couple of other matters that have been brought to my attention in my other standing committees already, that I believe that this this committee should be handling. So I ask your indulgence, and I ask that that your indulgence or your patience, very little patience, that I meet with the procedural officer early next week, and then we can get that draft program out. I hope that I haven't spoken to the procedural officer about that yet, so I hope I haven't blindsided her in that. But I'm aware that we don't have much time. That brings us to resolutions and actions. I think we've already had the one resolution to act swiftly on the Public Service Commissioner renewal or appointment process. Are there any other resolutions or actions to be adopted?
Chair, I think just the noting of the deadline in regard to our request for the detailed written report on the Public Service Commission grievances, etc. I don't know if I heard you correctly. I thought you said something like, did you say the end of, no, I don't know if that was the end of October, but I think the committee normally gives a month, you know, for these written reports to come in.
That's fine. I did receive, I don't know if the committee received it, but I also received some standalone reports and tags about those different matters. Is that what you're referring to, sir?
Chair, I'm not sure if the committee coordinator circulated that. I can definitely not say with surety, but if it was circulated to us, then maybe, you know, we need to read that and see if that's what we want. But I think the issue for me is just trying to get full information about the nature of the grievance, how that grievance was handled. Like, say, for instance, if the report says the matter was closed. So if it was closed, does that mean the grievance was, I'm not saying dismissed, but the grievance was resolved or whatever? So I don't know if there's a format. So, Chair, maybe the coordinator will tell us if she did email that to us, but I personally haven't seen such an email. So maybe if I could propose, Chair, that we get that clarity from the coordinator, and then we have a look at it and then inform whether that is inform you whether we believe that that's satisfactory or not.
All right, thank you, Ms. Kamish Ahmed. Do you want to come in and just confirm that?
Thank you, Chair. Chair, no, that information is not part of the pack or any of the investigative reports that were submitted to the Speaker. So yes, the committee may request for the list of the reports and the nature of the grievances.
Thank you so much. We will so move and so do. Thank you so much. Are there any other resolutions or actions? In that case, thank you very much to the members for the attendance. Thank you for your warm welcome, and I look forward to a productive and collaborative working experience with you. Are there any closing remarks from the members?
Chair, I would just like to extend my thanks to the EFF for saving the day in regard to the minutes.
Chair, I would like to, I would just like to say that we must keep in mind that we were referred to what was that clause that we were reminded of by the Public Service Commission, but there are also clauses in the Constitution as to what happens should there be unresolved issues. And I think that is something we must really take further, because looking futuristically, I can see that there's going to come a time when we don't agree with the appointments by the president. And I would like clarity on that, what happens next. How is it going to be resolved? Because if the Constitution does say, if there are matters that has not been resolved, then it doesn't make what the Constitution of the province says invalid. Doesn't invalidate it, but it stays unresolved. I think it's chapter 149 and 150, article 148 of the Constitution. And when we have these people here, we expect them to come here fully prepared. 148 says, conflicts that cannot be resolved. If a dispute concerning a conflict cannot be resolved by a court, the national legislation prevails over the provincial legislation. And then it says, status of legislation that does not prevail. A decision by a court that legislation prevails over other legislation does not invalidate that other legislation. It doesn't invalidate it, so you have a stalemate. But that other legislation becomes inoperative for as long as the conflict remains. So we can sit here, Honorable Dugmore, without a commissioner for a long time, as long as the dispute is still in place. If the province and the national cannot come to an agreement, it's important that we know what happens then.
Thank you, Honourable Ray. I think we'll cross that bridge when indeed we get there. Thank you, Honourable Provincial.
Thanks, Chair. No, mine was to welcome you and appreciate and commend the manner on which we have dealt with today's session and hoping for a very cooperative arrangement going forward. And then in terms of what Honorable Mare just said now, we just so wish that there could not be such experiences where there would be a tug of war between national and provincial government on issues of service delivery that need our people. We need not to be egocentric when we are dealing with issues, because this will, at the end of the day, impact on people on the ground. But let's welcome everything, the reports that were submitted today and everything, and the manner of which we have conducted our meeting, and we're looking forward to a collaborated approach going forward. Thanks very much, Chair.
Thank you so much, Honourable Provincial. Honourable Dugmore.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And I'd like to echo those words. And I know we're definitely not going to enter this debate now, but I think we're very fortunate in our country that we have a constitution which very clearly delineates the role of the legislature, the national as well as the provincial executives, as well as the judiciary. And my understanding is that if such a dispute were to emerge, firstly, there's a section in the Constitution which talks about intergovernmental disputes, how those can be resolved. And clearly, we also have a situation where any decision, can be taken on review. So if a decision by the Premier, for instance, not to take forward the name coming from the legislature, or if the President overrules the recommendation of the Premier, etc., it has to be a rational decision. And the courts, fortunately, would be in a position to decide that. So I think we should celebrate the Constitution. I know Honourable Murray is a constitutionalist and would also respect the fact that the founding fathers and mothers of our democracy drafted the Constitution, which actually, I would argue, did anticipate such a situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Dugmore. I just want to also say thank you very much, Honourable Provincial, and everybody else for that warm welcome once again. What I will do is that I will become au fait with the previous minutes, resolutions, and business of the House, of the committee, and then I will come back to the committee, including with that program that we will devise with me and the procedural officer, and with possible options. So no further ado, thank you very much, members, for your time and for your attendance. Please have a safe and restful and enjoyable weekend, and we'll see each other shortly. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Bye.
Thank you, Chair. Bye.
Thank you, Chair.